So we're talking today with Whitney Lester from the Hampton Roads Workforce Council. This is probably going to be one of the more unique interviews we've done because I'm essentially interviewing our sponsor for doing this podcast. We're doing this on your behalf. And I know you came in here with some things that you want to talk about what the Workforce Council has been doing, specifically what's been accomplished. And as we were talking before we started recording, there's a lot of things that have changed recently.
There are. There's a whole lot that's going on, and it continues to evolve and grow. We're building something, and I say we. It's a huge collective we that this region is building together. The Hampton Roads Workforce Council, we find ourselves at the hub of it, but there's so many spokes, and without them, it's nothing. But collectively, we continue to build. I mean, continuous improvement exists all over the place, and we have visions for further growth several years out and beyond.
So let's back this up a little bit so people should understand what the Workforce Council is, why does it exist, where did it come from, and then we'll get around to what it's doing today and more importantly what we want to be doing tomorrow.
The Hampton Roads Workforce Council is a workforce agency. We're basically a quasi-government entity. We're one of 14 workforce boards in Virginia. We exist in some ways the same way we have since 1974. We have simply grown beyond the standard limits that many workforce boards really where they exist. So the Workforce Council, as a workforce board, like many across the Commonwealth and across the country, receive money from the government, usually the Department of Labor, and we do the things that workforce agencies do, like have workforce centers. Ours are called Virginia Career Works, where job seekers can come in. We have business services that work with local businesses to understand their needs and really marry those two sides of it while working with training and education partners as we utilize funding to defray the cost of training for both businesses and for participants.
You said there are 14 across the state. Virginia's a pretty big state. It runs from the sea to the mountains. So it sounds like each one of those workforce councils was sort of focused on developing the workforce for those particular industries in those regions.
That's it, and really their mission has been under the parameters of what I just described as workforce centers, working with businesses, job fairs. I don't mean to shortchange any other workforce board. I just happen to know that the Hampton Roads Workforce Council is the largest in Virginia, in part because 4 years ago, we merged the Southside Hampton Roads with the Virginia Peninsula to create one very large workforce area that comprises 15 cities and counties. We receive 25% of the state's workforce funding now. Our CEO, Sean Avery, was never one to rest on really that good work. And he had a notion, has a career in workforce development, and he had always had a notion of doing more. And that's why in 2019, he put out a call to help better understand the talent challenge, the problem that businesses across the region were having, finding good workers to come to work for them. And after that, a study was conducted and some funding was garnered so that we could really put together a division and launch into talent across the region, across industry. With that, I came on board. I had been on the board of the Workforce Council for close to a decade, and I came on board with this fledgling talent division to really understand the challenges that businesses were facing and address them in the way that the workforce could with the resources that we had. That was 2019, and I came on board in September. 6 months later, the pandemic really hit in earnest, and I wondered at the moment, are we really going to see the talent challenge? Because I see a lot of businesses shutting down. Well, the businesses, by and large, came back, and in many cases, the workers did not. So the problem became exponentially difficult, tenfold, I think. At that time, we really needed to figure out, you can't solve for all the industries and every component of the region. You got to really go with the largest economic driver and the folks who are feeling the largest pain points first. the maritime industry. It is in Hampton Roads the lifeblood of what we do: shipbuilding and ship repair. And maritime also goes to the port. We've got offshore wind, we have bridge tunnel expansion. The water touches everything we do in Hampton Roads, as you know. Um, for our purposes, we took the entire gamut of business and said we're gonna focus on maritime. And as it has shaken out within that, we said we really need to focus on shipbuilding and ship repair. Again, large economic driver with the most in need as we move forward. In 2020, I applied on behalf of the Workforce Council for a grant from the state funding mechanism called Go Virginia. I asked for $663,000 to put some full-time dedicated talent to the talent problem, and that we needed some people. It couldn't be anybody's pet project or committee. It needed to be someone's job, and more than one person's job. And we really went about it that way. And we were given that grant in full in the fall of 2020, just about 5 years ago. And we set about going to work on it was called the Targeted Talent Pipeline Project for the maritime industry in Hampton Roads. With that, we hired a team to do some macro level analysis. We knew that we needed to address, define, and understand the problem before we could go about solving it. And so we hired an employer engagement director. We hired a training provider engagement director, and we hired a business intelligence analyst. So really what it was, let's understand the problem. Somebody's got to get in lockstep with industry. Anecdotal information is not helpful. We can't just hear, we need a bunch of welders. That doesn't give us any barometer off which to go. So we needed to understand what the problem was. The methodology that we have used since 2020, and one that I consider to be really the playbook that we have operated on, is the United States Chamber of Commerce's Talent Pipeline Management. They have an academy, they have a methodology. It's the backbone of what we have done in talent work. And it is a 6-stage strategy that really folks have said it's not rocket science. It involves a lot of common sense, but it's really well organized and it's well thought out. There are entire states in America that have adopted this. Their state government, their workforce entity has adopted this methodology. And we set about running through the 6 phases of the strategy. And really it says this has to be employer-led. It has to be industry-driven. You have to start by identifying that problem. So with that, Jackie Rondeau on our team, our employer engagement director, created an employer collaborative. It began as less than a dozen. It now numbers 26 businesses whose numbers comprise really about 85% of shipbuilding and ship repair in Hampton Roads in terms of the numbers of employees that we now amass in that collaborative. We create, you've got to get buy-in, and a lot of people at the outset of this said, is this just another well-intended but useless program that you're going to make me go to some meetings and have some conversations? And our mission from the get-go was, it's going to be different, if only because we're at no cost to you all. We're making this our job to put full-time dedicated talent towards this issue. And we know you're having challenges. And she collected everybody in the room. And at first, there's folks who are competing for contracts with each other every month. And at first there was a little reticence, but soon enough, someone said, I'll speak. You know what problem that we're having is blank. And more hands went up. We're having that challenge too. And so what has happened is it's a community within the community of folks in the shipbuilding and ship repair industry. And the data exchange that we conduct with them is both quantitative and qualitative. So we have surveys that we send out. It began with, we need your 3 most coveted, most in need positions that you're having trouble filling for. 3 is not good enough. We're going to have to go to 6. We now are at 9 positions within the maritime industry. So welder, electrician, ship fitter, pipe fitter, inside machinist, outside machinist, NDT, coatings and preservation, and sheet metal, all of which are important to building and repairing ships. We need to know how many you need. We need to know how many you need right now, 6 months from now, a year from now, and 2 years from now. Not everybody can say with certainty because of the way some short-term contracts go, but within reason, people started giving us that data. And we protect it, and we aggregate it, and we provide a regional picture of demand. That's our demand signal, and that is the barometer that you can go off, is to understand what this region is going to need for now and into the near future.
And there's so much to unpack there. um, I mean, I've been on several sides of this, right? Because it's not a simple problem. I heard this when I was in uniform. One of the things you talked about was combining the workforce councils that had been in the region, right? That was no small thing. Is I know when I was in uniform, I don't think I said it, but I know I was in the room hearing it in the Navy, that it's hard to get anything done here because you've got, at the time, it was 7 cities, right? Every city has its own council, has its own priorities, and trying to get them to just agree on what the problem is was significant. You said the water touches everything in the region. Well, that creates boundaries and barriers as well. Like what happens up on the north side is not the same on the south side. Just going from Norfolk to Portsmouth can be a challenge, right? Just tell somebody you got to pay the tunnel fare to go through, and like, I don't want to do that. There have always been a lot of people that wanted to solve this problem, but it was an enormous task to get people just to the table. And then you said data several times in there, to actually collect meaningful, relevant data to do something with. When we talk about $663,000, what, 6 years ago now, that's a drop in the bucket. It's nothing to say, I need $1 million to do a simple study, but you actually hired people that have now made some genuine progress on what's not a very significant amount of money, but a huge return on investment there.
Thank you for saying so. We believe that, and the folks at Go Virginia have very graciously said, please tell that story as an example of what some seed money can do to build something.
I was on the board of one of those other organizations that wanted to get at this, and just, you've somehow put together the team and gotten the traction and gotten the right people at the table to make some progress here. So let's talk about what some of those things are.
So the next step after we achieved that demand signal was to really understand the supply side of things. And in order to do that, supply can come in many, many varieties, but the single greatest avenue of supply is going to be your training and your training and education. So, and training and education is very broad and encompasses an array of providers. It will always begin with what we term the emerging workforce. This is K-12. This is your career and technical ed centers within the school systems. And again, it's also a challenge that with so many localities, each doing their own thing, we have that many school systems, and they're not all the same. And we try and help the ones that need boosts in some directions, and key off some of the ones who are doing it at the top of their game. After K-12, of course, there's community colleges, which are just as important. And in some cases, the numbers are the most significant batch of entry points into the maritime industry that we have. And historically, we worked with 3 community colleges that we had great relationships with: Tidewater, Virginia Peninsula, and Paul D. Camp. But as time has worn on, we've expanded our reach, and I'll speak to that a little bit. But we really can't just confine ourselves to the ones really within our closest proximity. But those schools are all divided between accredited work, going and getting degrees, and workforce kind of classwork training. And we concentrate on the latter, where we really need short tenured training that will get someone into a job as soon as possible. Train them well, but train them on a shorter term so that we can get folks hired and go into work. There are also private training providers in our region that do a heck of a job, and again, if, as you and I have discussed more than once before, if this were a turnkey solution and really easy, we would have done it years ago. But it takes all of these training providers operating in alignment in order for this to work. And that is that is a lot easier said than done, and it's something that we've learned a lot as we've been going at this. So really what we do is we have to send out similar surveys. We have a different training provider collaborative that is comprised currently of 36 different entities. And again, we send out that we do the data exchange and we aggregate the information to know what's across this region, what's being trained and where in each of these skilled trades training categories. At that point, we do the data overlay and we look at where the deltas are. And at times, this information is surprising. I think it's more surprising to the general public and to businesses outside the maritime industry when we have collaborative meetings with our employers and we show them, for example, welding has had a lot of high-profile investment into that skilled trade over the last decade. As such, the gap is winnowing between how much is needed and how many how many trained participants we're producing every year. That's a good thing. Other skilled trades such as ship fitting, pipe fitting, coatings and preservation, NDT for sure, we just aren't training enough of that in this region. And that's really what our data collection uncovers. We do get employers who are like, hallelujah, we've been saying this for a long time, or at least anecdotally, we've been kicking it around, and now we've got something that points to it. And then when we go after future investments, we can really steer it towards what we know. So we began as the holders, the collectors, the keepers, and the disseminators of good data to establish what the problem really is, what it looks like, and where we need to focus. In 2022, in late 2022, we applied for and received an $11 million grant from the United States Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration, EDA. It was called a Good Jobs Challenge. And really what they said was they acknowledged the work that we had done to make these inroads and to work this macro level. And they said, you need to work the micro level. You need boots on the ground to go help start solving this problem. So with that $11 million and with a bunch of partners in the region with us on it, but we were the tip of the spear on that, we created a team, and that is where, in earnest, the Hampton Roads Maritime Training System began. We created what EDA terms sectoral partnerships. We already had these partnerships. We had been forming these. They said, a lot of the work that we expect these awardees to do, you've done, and you need to take it to the next level. So where we went from there was to do some recruitment and outreach out in the communities to bring folks into training programs. Where we really excelled at the Workforce Council has been case management. So that is, once someone expresses some interest in a training program, first, we try and make sure it's aligned with their interests, their skills, where they are geographically. As we said, when people see, if someone lives on the Upper Peninsula and they see something advertised at TCC, we can guide them towards something much closer to home.
When you say someone, that pronoun, you really mean an individual.
Yes.
Like a single person looking for work.
Yes. Yes. That's where you have to get with this. As much as we do broad outreach that says, everybody, go look up the jobs. We have to do a lot more active guidance on that to make sure that it actually happens. And a lot of it is because of hurdles and inertia and the things that would otherwise make the progress deteriorate. So we have folks who are following up, and hugely, a lot of the money that we got went towards defraying these training costs. In a lot of cases, they don't pay for training. And this is a real opportunity. In some cases, if the training is longer training and you really need to do this to get into this job, and this job, you really seem well suited for it, wraparound supports, which is to say, there's a lot of folks for whom a 6-week training class is absolutely prohibitive because I can't quit my job. I need the income that I've got, and this is a 40-hour-a-week training class. So that's where we can provide supports. In other cases, it's smaller supports such as gas cards or equipment, from PPE to even work boots and stuff. Whatever it is that would be a barrier, we're knocking down barriers to get people in. And our team of case managers will work with those individuals, continue to work, follow up, and make sure that, again, that progress is being made towards that end goal. Once the training is completed, we're also helping tether them to the actual opportunities. We use our connections with our collaborative of employers to put folks into real jobs that represent career pathways into real careers. Newport News Shipbuilding is by far the largest member and participant in the collaborative. And at times, it's 70–80% of the jobs that are needed are going straight to the yard. And as such, at times they have had one of their workforce staffers embedded in our organization with an office in our office. Really making sure, I mean, for us, communication is key, but really understanding challenges, understanding needs, and as businesses pivot, we've got to run with it and make sure that alignment is a word that we use a lot, and it's really important.
That's got to be a pretty unique kind of setup where this quasi-government private organization of the Workforce Council has got an employer that, first of all, they must recognize that what you're doing is successful, that they're dedicating a cost to put in one of their employees in your office side by side with you. So they must see value from it, and they've got to see the opportunity.
They do, and the relationship has only grown stronger every day. That doesn't mean that any other organization, any other business in the community isn't as important. They are. And with ship repair yards like Fairlead, where you used to be, and with Kalana's, and with Lion, and I mean, I could go on. Each of these matters to us, and it is Jackie's mission to make sure that they're heard for all the qualitative feedback that we need to be, what's a real hurdle for us or something that we haven't considered, and then we see what we can do in terms of future project planning. But also that quantitative, we've got to have the numbers. We got to know where we stand, how much of a dent are we making. And so after the Good Jobs Challenge Award, we also got a series of funding amounts from localities within the region. There was a Norfolk Strong, Virginia Beach contributed, various municipalities in the region. But we also got some money from the General Assembly under something called HR Strong, Hampton Roads Strong. And this all, I think, emanated during pandemic times, but it really, when you get a little momentum, and if people can start to sense that something good is going on here. You and I have spoken that there was a time, and it was early in my tenure doing this, when I would hear folks from the General Assembly in Richmond or from the governor's administration or from Washington say, Whitney, Hampton Roads needs to get its act together. I'm getting multiple requests for the same thing from different entities, each saying, we represent Hampton Roads, and until you do that, the answer has got to be no. And the truth is that with every step that we've taken, it's really been about creating a cohesive unit, this ecosystem, this HRMTS, this system. And it is funny, we'll encounter some folks who say, I don't really understand what the Hampton Roads Maritime Training System. And we're like, it's you, it's us, we're all in this together. But we're operating as a system where, with the Workforce Council at the hub, getting that supply and demand and really saying, okay, here's where we consider the problem to be, and everyone contributing to that data center. But then along the way, with the funding that we got, the biggest step along the way after that $11 million award was when the Navy's Maritime Industrial Base office, we had meetings with them in conjunction with Newport News Shipbuilding. And the idea was put to us that some funding could be set aside for some workforce projects in the region. And with that, we went to work on coming up with what does the region really need in order to start solving some of these problems. Right off the bat, we knew that we didn't have the training capacity. Based on the data we were showing, we did not have the training capacity in the skilled trades that support the maritime industry to really dig in on some of this uphill battle that we had in terms of numbers. I mean, truly, The number of hires in these skilled trades every year is 3,000 and 4,000 people every year. And a lot of that's from Newport News Shipbuilding. I mean, I think as many as 5,000 people need to be hired every year. People are usually alarmed by that. People in either other industries or other regions, and we've just had to put our head down and say, okay, we're gonna start producing those. So so really, what some of the workforce projects, the earliest ones, began with, unless we create enough capacity, we're going to be spinning our wheels. We can create great programs, but we just aren't putting enough people through training and into industry.
So it's not enough to say those jobs are real and we need to fill them. Right? So we took that one step back and said, well, they've got to be trained before they show up to do the work. Is that where the effort went into?
It is. It is. The skids get greased tenfold if folks have hit that crossroad and said, I think I want to go get a job in this industry. Sometimes the training is a proving ground, and where people can decide. There are instances of people who want to be a welder and then decide, figure out that they really don't like fire or confined spaces, or whatever it is that will be a factor that will wash them out before they can even really get going. So that's one piece of it. And then a lot of these companies in the industry in the region, they're hiring for fit, and they almost want a malleable ball of clay, but to have some skills, something that says you can do the physical requirements, you sort of understand what this job entails. Okay. And it's a challenge. It remains a challenge, because the world is out there pulling people into industries left, right, and center, and the maritime is but one of them. So, so capacity is one piece of it, to make sure that there's enough training programs that, yes, people are sort of sliding into jobs once they jump on that down that ramp.
We've been talking about this, needing people to do these jobs for several years now. Uh, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but are we making any progress in people showing up saying they want to be a welder, and that at least they now understand what that is?
They do better than ever, and that's been through several pushes that we've been behind. One is awareness and recruitment, attraction, marketing, whatever you want to call it. It's been something that it can't just be go work in the shipyard. And I think that for a while there was an outdated MO in industry, that there was always going to be a line out the door of people wanting to work at these yards because in many cases their parent or grandparent had worked at the yard, and it's a great sustainable career, and doesn't everybody know that? And it simply is the way of the world that everyone is familiar with a lot more careers and industries than they ever have been. And in the information age, it's not just a given. So that's been a challenge for us, but that's been something that we have seen incremental change with people. First of all, understanding what the shipyard is, what it does, and beyond that, to understand what careers exist there and what career pathways. It can't. We really try to emphasize that it's not a job. There's a position description and there's a job, but really, if you don't understand, if you're not drawn to see that this job leads to this job, and you can go this way or this way, and maybe 3 or 5 different ways, and here's what the wages look like at each stop, and really what benefits there are to this, and really what culture exists there, then they're not going to come. And so we've been really diligent about hammering home that career pathways over jobs. So I think the answer is yes. We have seen more folks showing up who are at least prepared and ready to undertake this job. That doesn't mean that we don't have retention challenges. That doesn't mean we can't do better. And really, that's a challenge for the Workforce Council to dig in hand with industry. Far be it from us to tell companies their own business and their own retention strategies, but we want to help, and we want to, that's sort of a next level. We can get you in the door. We can get folks in the door there, but we've got to make sure they stay.
I know that was one of the things that when we came to you and said, "Hey, we think a podcast might be a way to kind of tell these stories," uh, and sometimes we worry, are we telling the same thing over and over again? But it's a career, it's not a job. And so many of the tradesmen we've talked to, all of the tradesmen that we've talked to have all talked about, I came in thinking I was going to do this and it led to that, and I'm doing something completely different. I still feel like somehow in the past 40 or 50 years where we've been telling people the path to success is through college, that we just had that break. And the family tradition, getting those stories didn't get passed down because we still had people doing the job, but there was nobody coming in behind them.
Right.
And now they're aging out. They're 60 or 70 years old and they're leaving, and their replacement is 20 years old. Right? There's that 40 or 50-year gap in there where people didn't progress through there.
First of all, as you said, there was a huge push to get people to go to college. My generation went through that. It was success looks like this, and your trajectory is just simply going to be better if you go to college. I see the pendulum swinging back from that, not necessarily as fast as I would like it. Parents seem to be the last bastion of holding out, because who doesn't want a better way for your child than the one you had? And if it just seems to make sense, I think the cost of four-year colleges and universities right now is so prohibitive. There's something for everyone, and these young individuals need to evaluate it for themselves, but need to have the help of parents and the school counselors and anyone else. It has to be really more apparent than it's ever been what the expectations are and what the path looks like.
Are we making progress there? Is K to 12, are those stories getting in there that kids understand, their parents understand, and the administrators that help to guide and shape these kids, that they have a better understanding of how important the industry in this region is and the pathways that are available? What's working there?
Here's what I see. Virginia Beach Public Schools was one of the recipients of some funding that came from the Maritime Industrial Base, and they doubled the capacity of their welding program at their technical center. They have more energy, enthusiasm, and still a long waiting list for that program. There's so much positivity about, if I can just get my child into this program, that's a trajectory that I want he or she to be a part of. And that's the system working, and that's the awareness piece working. That's not everywhere, and that's certainly not every trade, but that gives us much more to do as we start to see incremental progress.
I don't know if you saw the article in Wall Street Journal. There is a technical trades high school in Worcester, Massachusetts, that has got a waiting list of hundreds, which means that a lot of those kids are never going to get into that program.
Right.
And I hear the college enrollments are declining, and then I hear things like that where there's a high school in that region where there's a waiting list for kids to get in there. And I don't think the declining college enrollment is a bad thing, provided that there's a place for them to go. And it seems like the capacity is not yet there. So you talked about some of the schools in the region are doing a good job with that. And then it feels like the magic is happening at the community college level.
It really is. There's been enormous growth. In September, we had a ribbon cutting out in Suffolk. Paul D. Camp Community College partnered with the city of Suffolk and converted an old grocery store into a pristine, really, really effective, helpful, skilled trades center. And they are teaching virtually all the skilled trades that funnel into the maritime industry. And that was thanks to some maritime industrial-based funding. Virginia Peninsula Community College is doing much the same in Newport News. And capacity expansion is again just one tile in the mosaic of all that has to happen, but it's a big one. And within a 4 4 to 5 year time period, Hampton Roads will have doubled its capacity in skilled trades training in the trades that funnel into the maritime industry. That really by 2028 we will have done that. That's one huge piece. It's only a piece. What you have to then do is to say, okay, do we have instructors to teach all those classes? Finding instructors has been a challenge for years. And if you're doubling your training output, do you have good instructors? Do you have the right curriculum that's completely aligned with what industry is telling us they have to have walking through that door? Okay. How's all that training getting paid for? Because it costs, and it can't just be on the community colleges or the state or any one entity to fund all that. Okay, well, that's a challenge too. How do we fill those seats? Empty seats would be a crisis. Okay, we got to make sure that the outreach, and that comes from a lot of different ways. We took some maritime industrial-based funding, and we put together a campaign that drew many people into industry. It began with a series of standard marketing, that kind of a campaign, and then it began really into very specialized. There were focus groups. We've only scratched the surface on that, but it's really started to net thousands more people expressing interest via the website maritimejobsva.com, which is a platform that our marketing partner created as a landing spot. I mean, that's really when people say, where do I go? That's the start, maritimejobsva.com.
Maritimejobsva.com.
Yes. So if you're looking for maritime jobs in Virginia, in particular Hampton Roads, and it does lay out, you get information of all kinds there. You got information about training providers and where classes exist, because it is important to meet people where they are, geographically at times. And really what the trades are. You can learn more about it. You can find these podcasts that you've done that I really do find helpful, not just saying that because you're sitting here. It is to tell the story beyond when industries have too much that's in the ether, a little far afield for especially a young person to understand, to take that and make it really tangible with a person who's actually can tell their story and say, I began here, and trust me, I didn't know any more than you do, and here's what my journey looks like. I think that's really helpful. We have to make sure that as many audiences as possible are seeing these things. But that's a huge piece. And again, it's just one of the many, I always say this, as you look at that end-to-end system that we've created, and every piece of its capacity building was where we began, but it is far from where we landed. I mean, we're doing so much K-12 outreach programs like that. We're doing veterans outreach. You know, we've got so many veterans, military spouses, and transitioning service members in this region. Every piece of it matters, and every piece of it requires resources, aka funding. Every piece of it needs attention. It needs strategic thinking. It needs people to say, okay, we've thought that way for years, but the intel that we're getting now says the focus needs to be here.
Again, going back to the success that the Workforce Council has had, it kind of getting this gravitational attraction, right? It could have been any of them, but it has been the Workforce Council that has made this work. All the other good intentions were good intentions, but this is now working. So getting funding to do things is never easy. Is it easier than it has been? Are we at least confident that we're doing the right things that are going to continue to attract those enablers?
It's a terrific question, and we're never foolish enough to think that any funding stream will continue in perpetuity at all, even year to year. We look at now where we've got good channels, and half of our job these days is to explain to funders the good work that we've done. Even the ones who have been our funders, to say, look, this was your return on investment, because if you can't measure it, it didn't happen. But we have had success. We've had folks come to our neck of the woods and call us the most mature workforce model in maritime in the country. And we look at each other, and for about 2 seconds, we can breathe a sigh of relief that what we're doing has had some really good netted, some good success.
That kind of loops back to where we started, where we've come a long way in a very short amount of time of saying, you 7 cities got to get your act together, to now,
Yeah.
it's not just in the region that this has been a success, but nationally recognized as this is the model that works.
It is, and again, there's not some secret sauce that we created that, but it has been. I mean, and what we have done, we can take pride in the work we've done. It hasn't happened without industry coming to the table and saying, "We'll work together. Let's work together on a solution." And it hasn't come together. It hasn't happened without the the bevy of training and education providers saying, okay, we'll work with you. We'll tell you what we're doing. We'll show you how many we've trained in this area every X number of weeks and months. Everyone's participated in a way where it means something. We've got community organizations who are helping us out and become partners on some of these grants, and they do their part. I mean, everyone really, it's like a village. Everyone, without, if it falls off in any one of these areas, you can definitely, you'll be able to see the impact. So for now, we use lots of euphemisms, quarterbacking it, or really, in the driver's seat on this. But whatever metaphor that we can use that depicts everyone being a part of this system and us simply at the epicenter of this, doing what we can to hold it all together. That's really the picture to paint.
Secret sauce is just the hard work and sweat that went into it.
It's funny. It seems like there are times I say 5 years and I say, has it really been 5 years? And there's other times I'm like, oh, it has been 5 years. It's been that many months and whatnot. So
What do you think the odds of getting a governor's school for the maritime arts and sciences are?
I think nothing's off the table. I think if we continue to rise above what we have done historically and we start to net the results that people are looking for, then I think that everything's worth talking about, and you simply take ideas like that down the road until they don't make sense anymore. And I'm eager for them. We're in ideation phase in a lot of ways. As much as we have to continue everything that we're doing right now. We are looking at, okay, if we get some more funding and we think the capacity starts to be at least about where we want to be, what's not getting done? And we're not afraid to, as much as we think we're doing it really well in here in Hampton Roads, it would be really silly to think that other regions, I mean, we go to New England and we're borrowing very liberally from their playbook. We're telling them about what we're doing. We're hosting other regions to come to us and we ask, what's working for you all? Because truly it makes no sense for us to begin anew on something that's already getting some success somewhere else.
I think Colin Powell said something like, it's amazing what can be accomplished when you don't care who gets the credit.
It's true. It's true. I don't want this to come off like this is a workforce council rah-rah. It's not. I feel very lucky that what we embarked upon 5 years ago has been something that turns out it was needed, and that it was needed, and everyone began to buy in. Without buy-in, and again, it began in that first meeting with a bunch of employers. I mean, the Virginia Ship Repair Association has been integral. They have been so helpful, and we had been working with them for years, but they helped us put all this together. Without all that buy-in and people saying, okay, we think we've heard this song before, but all right, this looks like a novel approach to it. And now people, truly, there was something that happened recently where some messaging got sent out to a lot of the industries and the training providers by a third party. And because it didn't have Hampton Roads Maritime Training System in the messaging, and it didn't mention the Workforce Council or Sean Avery or me or anybody, a lot of phone calls were made like, hey, what's happening here? Is this some siloed thing? Which is fantastic, because we got to go, actually, they're with us. We'll get that messaging straight. But it meant that instead of splintered and everything being fragmented and competition, even if it was well intended, but everyone's sort of working against each other, we're all moving as one right now, and that's got a far better chance of succeeding than something that's much more individualized.
It's an amazing amount of progress in a short amount of time in a really complex problem. There's a lot to be proud of there, and I think we've talked about a lot of those things, but there's so much more there.
There is. There's good stuff that happens. I mean, we really just dipped a toe in it on our veterans employment centers and the good work that goes on there with Sultan Camp. I mean, it's it's a lot, and there's so many so many different programs and projects, and even that, Sultan likes to say that the outreach to veterans of all varieties is there's a sea of goodwill so much, and that people will drown in it because it's just overwhelming. And his job and his team's job has been to sort through that for people and create really good results. And there's a lot of good that happens there. Our youth program, we have had a pair of youth projects since 2023 within this maritime space. And we've been partnered with ODU and the Virginia Defense Manufacturing Center, and the work that they're doing to create a maritime educational hub. I could go on and on, but the good news is it's been a wellspring of new, creative, but thoughtful, intelligent, and plugged in. Not people veering off into sort of separatist waters, but people being a part of the team in a way where good things are happening. I mean, just this one of the youth programs that we've had for a couple of years is really involved 42,000 students over that period of time in some way or form of immersion. And it's novel and it's different, and it's not somebody coming to a class and saying, go into the maritime industry. It's hands-on stuff. It's people really getting to see it. And that's where I hope, not today, but sometime in the not too distant future, that as folks are reaching the end of their high school careers, they've learned about shipbuilding and ship repair at a very young age. They got a little more hands-on in that middle school, and by high school, they're doing the work, and that they're either got an internship, or they've got they're part of a CTE program where they're actually developing a really solid skill, and then they kind of know where they want to go. We've got work to do before that is more common than uncommon, but we see what the path looks like to get there.
Well, if there's a better way to close this out, I think you really hit on it by saying there's a sea of goodwill out there that people will drown in. And from my perspective, it looks to me like the Workforce Council has done a fantastic job of building the bridge, tunnel, vessel transport capacity to keep people from drowning in that and making it for making useful passage through this.
It's been a pleasure, and there's so much ahead of us that it makes my mind swimming. But yeah, we do see ourselves in that way. We do.